How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, there is some breaking news. We know very little about it, but the FBI is saying they have foiled an alleged murder-for-hire plot against Attorney General Pam Bondi. I will keep you posted as we learn more about that situation. I want to talk to you about a really disturbing story. And I got to give credit to the New York Times. And I want to say this. I'm a regular critic of CNN and the New York Times, in large part because I know they can do better. They have always been liberal in their frame of mind and worldview, but as progressives have gone further left, so have these institutions. But occasionally they do good work. And like with CNN, I would highlight their international coverage that other networks just can't do because they don't have the resources. And with the New York Times, occasionally they have some very in-depth and profound reporting. And this is very disturbing. And I need to start this hour by telling you it's disturbing. And I need to remind you that when I got elected to office, it was on an effort to stop human trafficking. It is an issue I care much about. It is an issue as well that I have seen more and more people over the years as the issue has been put within a tribal lens. A lot of liberals who used to care about it no longer think it's a big deal. And so that's why I have to give credit to the New York Times and to Emily Baumgarten-Nunn, the reporter who was vetted with Vice investigators to uncover this. And let me read for you part of this. Anna paced on the sidewalk at 68th in Figueroa. I'm mispronouncing that. Her front teeth missing and an ostomy bag taped down under her hot pink lingerie. She surveyed the intersection in South Central Los Angeles where preteens were hobbling in stilettos and G-strings. It was a Tuesday night this January, and Anna knew that most of the girls longed for a coat or gloves, something to keep them warm, but covering up was not an option. Their eyes were cast down, but their hands waved mechanically at every car, angling for another customer to help meet their traffickers' quotas. Anna was working too, but the years had worn down any visceral anxiety into something more like resignation. Anna was 19, but the girls on the street reminded her of herself and her sister when they were first put on the street for sex. She was 13, her sister was 11. Their story had been unoriginal, at least for the street. Foster kids turned runaways, turned recruits, drawn in by a new friend on Instagram who offered to help them get by. The friend dropped Anna and her sister off at a motel and handed them lacy bikinis. Anna asked what they were for. They needed to turn in $800 each by morning, the friend said. They stood on a corner, shivering. It would take at least half a dozen customers each. By now, Anna had grown accustomed to the protocols of the Blade, a roughly 50-block stretch of Figueroa Street that had become one of the most notorious sex trafficking corridors in the United States. She knew to approach cars from the passenger side and get the money as soon as she climbed in. She knew which motels had rooms set aside for just this purpose, which schools and businesses didn't padlock their parking lots at night. She knew she needed to be dropped back off on the Blade every 30 minutes if she was going to reach her new quota of $1,200. The sameness in the days and weeks and months on Figueroa was such that Anna remembered little of them. The Blade was an 8-minute drive from the University of Southern California in yet another universe. Parents pushed strollers past the traffic girls as they took their own children to school. Amid boarded up storefronts were a few that catered specifically to the trade, a smoke shop with the banner "Free Magnum Condoms with any purchase," and a lingerie store named in cursive "Sluts." Figueroa seemed to be the one street in all of Los Angeles where nobody even honked. Customers waited politely as if in line at a drive-thru to peruse the menu and take their pick. Over the years, the Blade has become much busier than when Anna started. More girls, more customers, more traffickers idling in their Hellcats and Porsches on the side streets, watching to make sure the girls didn't hide any money and didn't snitch. Anna had seen the Blade expand from 3 main intersections in Figueroa to more than 3 miles. She'd met girls brought in from the East Coast and the Deep South, and there sometimes seemed to be 4 times as many minors as before, easy to spot by their over-the-top makeup and unsteady gait. The police helicopters Anna used to notice hovering overhead with searchlights seemed to become infrequent. Eventually, they disappeared. In the shadows, Figueroa had become more violent. The younger the girl, the more customers would pay, which meant preteens were often being robbed and assaulted by groups of older girls trying to make quota. The traffickers who governed the street were worse. Tonight, Anna was waving at cars in front of a tire shop when a trafficker pulled up on the wrong side of the street, climbed out, and beat one of the girls near Anna over the head with a pistol. The girl had probably looked at him wrong, Anna decided. She knew better than to intervene. When he left, Anna plodded over to her own trafficker to ask for a break. The answer was no. Anna took some Percocets and chased them with Hennessy to numb herself. The temperature dropped, and soon she felt herself longing for another customer's car just to get out of the cold. That's the way this starts. And here is the truth. In California, progressive policies have enabled this. Scott Wiener, who is a progressive gay activist and member of the California legislature, pushed for legislation that actually made human trafficking easier to do in California. He's now running against Nancy Pelosi. It is appalling to read this New York Times piece and to understand what's happening. And if you have been paying attention to the views of the left for some time, they are increasingly fine with human trafficking because they believe it's about empowering the women who are actually the victims. The spin from the left is that budgets have been cut, so the Los Angeles Police Department is shorthanded and can't combat it. This is something even some Democrats are saying, the National Guard could actually do something about this. But California actually passed a law, SB 357 from Scott Wiener, that makes it impossible for law enforcement officers to do anything about child exploitation. The New York Times actually does hint at this. Police officers' jobs grew even more challenging when California repealed the law allowing the police to arrest women who loitered with the intent to engage in prostitution. The repeal, known as SB 357, was intended to prevent profiling of black, brown, and trans women based on how they dressed. But when it was implemented in January of 2023, the effect was that uniformed officers could no longer apprehend groups of girls in lingerie on Figueroa, hoping to recover minors among them. Now officers needed to be willing to swear they had reason to suspect each girl was underage, but with fake eyelashes and wigs, it was often impossible to tell. One girl told Vice officers her traffics had explained everything there succinctly. "We run Figueroa now," he said. Why? Because Scott Wiener in the California legislature decided in the name of ending racial profiling that we had to stop the police from randomly arresting women who were loitering on the side of the road to engage in prostitution, which they call sex workers now. It's sex workers. It's not prostitution, it's just sex work. And supposedly it's legitimate and it empowers women and their bodies to make money. That's the way the left views it. And the practical reality is that it empowers human traffickers to prostitute underage girls. This is happening in Los Angeles, California, and across California. Young women, oftentimes runaways, they get lured, drugged, beaten, sometimes killed. In September of 2021, when Anna was 15, a sergeant matched her tattoos to ones he had seen in an online sex ad and began to track her. When she was finally found, the sergeant wept from relief and told her about a woman named Shannon who could help her. Shannon Forsyth ran an anti-trafficking nonprofit called Run to Rescue, which included a recovery house for 4 girls. A spot had just opened up. The Run to Rescue house was not a typical group home, the sergeant told Anna. The organization took no government funding, which meant Forsyth could run the home as she wanted. There were no cell phones, no weekend passes, no revolving door of shift staff. Instead, the girls had live-in parental figures, Forsyth and her husband, and a customized healing plan they worked through as a unit. There were therapists, addiction recovery counselors, nurses, and tutors. The girls kept journals. They navigated conflict at the kitchen table. They took trips to the mountains, the beach, and Baskin-Robbins, sometimes twice a week. Forsyth's home had only one real rule. Everybody agreed to abide together. No more running away. Anna heard all of this and scoffed. She had lived in plenty of group homes, each with its own set of surprise horrors. She was not interested. The sergeant would have needed to pass Anna off to child services, but there was a warrant out for her arrest. By then, Anna had committed a variety of crimes, some forced by her traffickers, some by her own volition. Instead of a new foster care placement, she was sent to juvenile hall, which brought Forsyth months to win her over. Forsyth called Anna every week to pray with her. She showed up at the courthouse for every hearing, even though she wasn't allowed in the room. She pleaded with her social worker and the judge to sign paperwork. They would grant her power of attorney. Anna wanted to know who this odd woman was, this woman who seemed obsessed with her, maybe capable of keeping her off Figueroa. Deep down, Anna wanted that too, and so far, Forsyth seemed to keep her word. After 4 months, Anna relented, and they pulled away from the courthouse in Forsyth's car. Anna noticed the back seat doors were unlocked, but a gut feeling told her not to run. She wound up back on the streets. She had to have 7 surgeries. She was back in the old habits and wounded. A fractured face, a broken back, knocked out teeth, a ruptured colon, and other injuries. She went a month without a shower and her hair fell out. This is the life that she fell into. And Miss Forsyth continued to be persistent and prayed to help. Y'all, this is happening on the streets of the United States. Underage girls being prostituted, while progressives call it sex work and claim it's empowering their bodies. And when you point out the ramifications of their policies, they deny it, they deflect, they get defensive. They say, who are we to judge? Y'all, we have real problems in this country, and a ballroom at the White House isn't one of them. And Democrats want to define themselves in opposition to everything Donald Trump has done. Can we turn our attention to this problem, please, progressives? That the laws progressives in California passed have empowered human traffickers who are trafficking underage girls. And there is high demand and a customer base. Can we talk about that for a minute instead of a government shutdown? Can we talk about that for a minute instead of an east wing of the White House? Can we talk for that for a minute instead of Donald Trump running for a third term? Can we talk about any of these problems, or are we only allowed to talk about Donald Trump? Saturday was the first of the month, which always meant big business. Everybody had their paycheck. Lines of cars wrapped around side streets. The sunset splashed gold and purple against the panes of a laundromat. It was February, but an ice cream truck was playing Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and Anna had already worked 6 days straight, and tonight everything ached. The skin around her ostomy bag stung. A kind man who had driven through each night that week and offered to pray for Anna had not shown up. And she finally got rescued by the Forsyth family again. At least somebody cares. Why don't the Democrats do something? They could fix this, and they've chosen not to. All they care about is Donald Trump. They don't care about these young women on the streets of Los Angeles who are being trafficked. And all they have to do is repeal one law. But they've decided to hold it hostage to the screams of racial profiling instead of the reality of what happens with this law. Howdy, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here, 877-973-7425. The United States Citizenship and Immigration Service has announced they're updating the citizenship test to ensure new U.S. citizens honor and embrace our history, civics, and values. The 2025 test assesses an alien's understanding of U.S. history and government in line with the statutory requirement and one of the many steps in the ongoing effort to restore integrity. U.S. citizenship, they say, is the most sacred citizenship in the world and should only be reserved for aliens who will fully embrace our values and principles as a nation by ensuring only those aliens who meet all eligibility requirements, including the ability to read, write, and speak English and understand U.S. government and civics, are able to be naturalized. Good for them. In contrast to the great New York Times profile of human trafficking in L.A., consider one where they're claiming that we're politicizing history now. Why? Because conservatives are getting rid of progressive spin from the history books, and they're upset about it. Now, you know, that's one of the reasons I like Old Glory Bank, because they were by conservatives for conservatives, and they've seen the debanking trends that progressives deny they're doing, even though they're well documented to be doing. You go to oldglorybank.com/Eric. You can get an account with Old Glory Bank. I've got a checking account and a savings account with them. No fee checking, no fee savings. You can get premium accounts. If you're active duty military, you can get a lot of the fees waived. You go to oldglorybank.com/Eric today. oldglorybank.com/ERICK. Sign up with Old Glory Bank today. You can get mortgages with them. You can do CDs with them. They're a fully functioning bank. They're online, but you can deposit cash with them even though they're online. And they're by conservatives. They're for conservatives. They're the fastest growing bank in the country right now, and they're great for businesses. I've got a number of friends of mine who run business, particularly in the gun industry, that I've recommended Old Glory Bank. They all have rave reviews. oldglorybank.com/Eric. You can go sign up with them today. oldglorybank.com/ERICK. It actually is my bank. I got a checking and a savings account with them. And you can too. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. When we come back, I'll take your phone calls, 877-973-7425. And a disturbing realignment of the American economy. And is AI to blame? I'll tell you what I know. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Before I move on, I want to take Gene's call, calling from Boswick, Florida. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Hi, Eric. It's great to talk to you. I'm very fine. My question is, where are all the indignant Democrats? Where were they all at when Obama was using drones to blow up people in the Mideast, and including American citizens that he killed, just because those people he designated as terrorists? Those Democrats that are out there today yelling and screaming had nothing to say when Obama was doing this. This is total hypocrisy on their part.
Gene, you're not supposed to mention this. There's no such thing as a hypocritical Democrat. They are pure as the driven snow. And if our Lord and Savior Barack Obama determined that people needed to die, well, you as an American, you're supposed to rally around the flag and say, yes, sir. It's Donald Trump is the illegitimate abomination. He's not allowed to do this. I mean, that's kind of where the Democratic position is on this stuff. Whatever Barack Obama want to do. Now, here's the irony, Gene. And this has not gotten a whole lot of coverage because it does make it awkward for the Democrats. And let's just acknowledge the awkwardness for the Democrats here that Barack Obama did use drones and killed American citizens without due process. And the irony is that when congressmen asked the Trump administration last week the justification that he could give for the power of the president to blow up these boats in the Caribbean without congressional approval, he cited Barack Obama killing an American citizen without due process. All he's done is he's taken the precedents of the Democrats and used them. For all the Democrats who say, and this is the thing that Democrats tend to forget, is for all the Democrats who say, oh, you Republicans, you're doing things now that the Democrats, they're going to do when they get back. And we're all like, you guys were already doing them. Barack Obama was already using drones against American citizens. Barack Obama and Joe Biden, they were the ones dragging pro-lifers out of their houses and arresting them. Barack Obama's IRS was weaponized against conservatives. Even the inspector general said so. I mean, all these people say, if you do this, Democrats are going to do it. Democrats have already been doing it. The press always gives the Democrats a pass and doesn't particularly cover these things. It's when Republicans do it that they get all the coverage. Now, I want to call your attention to a piece by Derek Thompson in his Substack. Is this the new scariest chart in the world, he writes. In the last few days, I've seen the following chart bounce around my corner of the internet, often with some commentary declaring it's the scariest chart in the world. The graph seems to show that the release of ChatGPT and the ensuing AI boom cracked the U.S. economy in two, crushing the workforce while lifting the stock market. You might have several reactions to the graph, including but not limited to, should we be alarmed by this picture? Irrespective of our emotional reaction to Sam Altman being his face beat on it, how is it possible? The stock market's up 70% in the last 3 years, while job openings are down 30%. And wait, are we even sure the data above is actually true, since after all, this thing's been circulated on the internet? The numbers are real. The stock market's on fire and the labor market is cooling, and these things really are happening at the same time in a way that's unprecedented in the modern era. Since October of 2022, the month that ChatGPT's debut supercharged historic investment boom in AI, total job postings in the economy have declined by 1/3, while the S&P 500 has increased 75%. Both things are true, and their juxtaposition is fairly historic. For the last few decades, job openings have mostly tracked the rise and fall of the stock market. Nothing like the current divergence between equity returns and job openings has ever occurred in the history of the Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey, which was first released in 2002. Some people may worry that this could be a long saga of how artificial intelligence ate the American economy and destroyed the working class. But there could be correlation, not causation. Derek Thompson writes, it's possible the generative AI boom created a new economic paradigm. For some big tech companies, perhaps the high cost of frontier chips, data centers, and energy is making it prohibitively expensive to hire and retain more workers while maintaining the desired profit margin. So big tech companies are shoveling their free cash flow into data centers instead of new headcounts. But there's at least one big problem with the idea that generative AI is responsible for the decline in job openings. Job listings did not peak in November of 2022 when ChatGPT came out. They peaked in March of 2022, the same month the Federal Reserve raised interest rates for the first time this cycle. Now, I'm going to skip Derek Thompson and the rest of his piece here. I'm just going to tell you that here's the problem. The problem is that the AI data centers and AI investment in this country is exploding, and it's sending the S&P 500 soaring, but the S&P 500 is really soaring because of the top stocks, not all the stocks. In fact, around the country in small businesses and elsewhere, the economy is not as good as the top line numbers would have you believe. In fact, when you look at the decline in job openings, you're seeing a decline in mining and logging, down 50% from November 2022 to August of 2025. That's an area of the economy that AI will have nothing to do with. Durable goods manufacturing is down almost 50%. Professional and business services could be impacted by AI, down about 40%. Non-farm employment down about 30%. Healthcare and social assistance hiring down just over 25%. Finance and insurance down 25%. Information economy down about 20%. Interestingly enough, the information economy actually had the smallest decline in job openings. The problem with our economy, dare I say tariffs are playing a role, but it's not just tariffs. It's overall in the economy, small businesses have never gotten over the inflation shock from the Biden era. And the Trump administration, bless their hearts, they haven't been able to really bring prices down or wages up. Part of the problem here is you don't want a dramatic crash in costs. That's deflationary, and deflation gives you a depression. What you want to have happen is you want salaries to go up. So you get inflation down to where it's growing at 1 or 2% instead of the 3% it is, but salaries are growing 3 and 4%. Salaries eventually catch up and cross inflation, so people feel like they have more money and are getting ahead in an economy where costs are slowly trickling up. That's not happening right now, and part of the reason it's not happening is, frankly, the tariffs. Small businesses and big businesses are absorbing the costs, but by absorbing the costs, they can't raise wages. And then on top of that, there are these other weaknesses in the economy. Let me read you this from Yahoo News. Top analysts at Bank of America Research are pulling back the curtain on the colossal $22 trillion universe of private capital, an asset class so massive it would be the world's second largest economy if it were treated as a country. As the global financial landscape faces tectonic shifts, Bank of America Research's latest thematic investing report reveals that private capital is reshaping how companies, investors, and economies think about growth, risk, and control, challenging the primacy of public markets and opening new frontiers for both innovation and caution. Private capital, defined by the bank as assets not available on public markets, includes private equity, private credit, and real assets. It has multiplied at a staggering pace, more than double since 2012 to $22 trillion by 2024. The explosion has been driven by a retreat from public markets. Since 2000, the number of U.S.-listed companies has halved to just over 4,000, even as the number of private venture-backed firms soared 25-fold. Startups now remain private for an average of 16 years, a third longer than a decade ago, reflecting a broad shift towards private capital and away from public scrutiny and regulation. The world's most transformative firms aren't found on the stock market ticker, Bank of America argues. Just as public stock markets have a magnificent seven, there's a private magnificent seven of hectacorns, each valued at $100 billion or more. The research team at Bank of America estimates the combined valuations have skyrocketed nearly fivefold since 2023 to $1.4 trillion. They evaluated the top 16 companies in the space, representing $1.5 trillion in value, 1% of global GDP. For investors, Bank of America finds private equity has outperformed the S&P 500 over this period by 6 percentage points per year on average. And there are other benefits to privacy. In the time spent on financial regulation paperwork every year, 12 Great Pyramids of Giza could be built, according to Bank of America. Now, here's the problem. As the story goes on to point to, there are less reporting. There's no public reporting. There's less oversight. There's less regulation. There could be problems. Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan pointed out that one of these companies has collapsed and said when you see one cockroach, there are probably more. In fact, it's probably true. But interestingly enough, J.P. Morgan at the same time is announcing they may start taking crypto for down payments for mortgages. After Dodd-Frank and the financial crisis of 2008-2009, And before that, the Enron situation and the legislation passed then, Sarbanes-Oxley, a lot of major companies are growing in private space because the regulatory burden is too high for them, it's too costly for them, and they just want to grow. And the problem is that you and I don't have access into these markets with few exceptions. So the rich can invest in them, and the rich do get richer. And you and I don't. We're left on the sidelines. I actually got invited into they clearly have no idea how little money I have. I got invited into a website where you actually can buy ownership interest in a number of these privately capitalized companies. There are a couple of them that I've looked at in the past, Anduril and others. I would love to own stock in Anduril. It's a weapons manufacturer, makes drones for defense and stuff. It's a very cool company. And I get emails a lot of times about these companies that are on these exchanges and the amount of money and stuff. But it's all there. There are no SEC filings. You have no real idea whether or not the information that they're talking about is real, whether or not the data and the assessment of the companies is good. And this is one of those reasons Andrew Ross Sorkin from CNBC is raising alarms about 1929 all over again, that the biggest growth out there is not on the publicly traded stock markets and on the lesser regulated, if not unregulated, private markets that you and I don't get to see, but where trillions of dollars is being flooded into. And we don't know if the companies are legitimate. The audits are not as good. The regulations are not as good. And the reason it exists, however, is because the government has made it too complicated to be a public sector company. So a lot of nimble companies that actually do mean well and are good, the costs are too overwhelming for them to try to go public right now. They don't need to. They got the money, and they don't have to go with the regulatory hurdles. This is the quote that stands out for me again. This is the quote. This is from Bank of America. In the time spent on financial regulation paperwork every year, 12 Great Pyramids of Giza could be built. That's what the government has done. It's not just us, it's the EU and others. As your company gets big, and you got to deal with the Europeans and us, the Chinese, the Japanese, everybody. In the time spent on financial regulation paperwork every year, 12 Great Pyramids of Giza could be built. That's a damning indictment on the government regulatory structure. They have made it so burdensome, a lot of companies have decided not to participate in publicly traded companies, which have shut you and me out of some great companies that we could have in our 401ks. But at the same time, it's also allowed the valuation of a lot of companies that have tied up a lot of capital that could be a house of cards, that could bring the entire economy down. Our government is a reactionary force. Rarely does the government actually proactively regulate. They tend to respond. And they responded to the Enron and the MCI WorldCom collapses and the like with Sarbanes-Oxley. And then they responded to the banking crisis with Dodd-Frank. And what they did is they passed more and more burdensome regulations that have chased a lot of capital into private markets where you and I can't get to them, nor can the government see them. And if the economy goes south, they could all come collapsing down. And here's the problem. You know and I know what Congress's response will be is actually to pass even more regulations, to regulate even more, and to keep you and me further away from being able to invest in good companies that are on the private market, because the government, in the name of protecting us, has decided to strangle the economy as opposed to just letting the creative destruction of the marketplace work. They keep trying to pick winners and losers instead of letting capitalism itself do that. And that just drives up regulatory costs and chases more businesses into the shadows. Javier Milei has scored a big electoral win in Argentina, securing and strengthening his position in Argentina's Congress. 99% of the vote counted, and they picked up 41% of the national vote, doubling their representation in Argentina's Congress. They've been a minority party in Congress, so much so they haven't been able to stop vetoes of the Congress rolling back Milei's actions. Now he gets to preserve his veto power, defend his sweeping decrees, and he can do more decrees that the Argentinian Congress is going to be able to stop. Interestingly enough, his result was stronger than what polls predicted. Polls had actually predicted Milei was not going to have a good turn, that the Peronist party was going to surge. It did not happen. Exit polling of voters showed that while people don't particularly like what's going on in Argentina right now with Milei, they actually trust him and don't want to see the people who screwed up the economy go back into power. There could potentially be a corollary here in this country, as voters don't like Donald Trump, but they really dislike the Democrats. Interestingly enough, Milei is economically to the right of Trump. Trump is much more of a populist Democrat. Economically, Milei is a big free market supporter. He's actually lectured Donald Trump on his free market support and lack thereof. Trump, of course, is a big fan of Milei's and wants to help Argentina, is willing to help Argentinian beef exports to the United States, much to the chagrin of American beef producers. He's willing to prop up the Argentinian economy to ease the burdens of Milei's reforms, but Milei's reforms are working. There's no longer a housing shortage in Buenos Aires. Rent prices have come down for people. Jobs have started growing again. His free market reforms are turning the corner in Argentina. And there's a lesson for the United States about the protectionism path we're going down compared to what Milei is doing in Argentina. Great success, and he's just been rewarded by the voters of Argentina. Speaking of free market reforms, Americans for Prosperity supports the free market. They support families and small businesses. They support deregulation. They support permitting reforms. They support school choice. So many great conservative policies. And, of course, they were big players in pushing the grassroots to mobilize for President Trump's tax reforms. All you have to do if you want to stay informed and be engaged with Americans for Prosperity is go to afpvolunteer.com. afpvolunteer.com. It's where you get engaged with the grassroots around America on the conservative side to mobilize voters, to stay informed, to talk to your local government, your state government, your federal government. You don't even have to be one of those activists who wants to show up. All you have to do is stay informed, and AFP will keep you informed about common sense legislation around the country that benefits conservatives. You go to afpvolunteer.com today, afpvolunteer.com, sign up with Americans for Prosperity, get involved in fighting for common sense conservative reforms. All right, I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of the day.